let's discuss about encapsulation. So here, if I mention the keyword capsule, so we know what is a capsule. Like sometimes we take capsules for medicine. So within capsule, we have something medicine that we usually take for some diseases. So here is limited. I mean, similar to that capsule concept. So just like within a capsule, we have different materials, different medicines. So here n means for verb form. Whenever we make a noun verb, at many cases we used n like able, then we use enable. So this is just the verb. So similarly, encapsulation, that means this is just like you can consider like a verb or something. Main thing, the keyword is the capsule. So here we know that we can wrap the data and the methods together. So previously in a class, we just, if we noticed, if let me show you from here. So that was a class here. So if you notice, in this particular person class, we have this different data like name, age, profession. So these are attributes or behaviors. These are different attributes, and its behaviors or functions or methods, like talk about you, eat. So these are different methods that works with these data. So in object-oriented programming, we are basically, binding this data and object together. So this is our person class. It has some data and object. It has some methods. Similarly, there could be another class, let's say cat or dog. So it could also have some other data, other method. So that's why we are considering different capsule. Like, so we are saying that we have different, let's say capsules. There we have data and associated method. So since we are wrapping data and method together, that means we are organizing our programming this way. So that's why we are calling it encapsulation. So also this has several advantages. One of the advantages is security. So okay, let me discuss here again. So as I was saying, that encapsulation means the idea of wrapping data and methods that work on the data within one unit. Next thing, one of the advantages, we can put restriction on accessing variables and methods directly. So we can provide security feature there, whether we will access or not. So we'll see an example here as well. So this can prevent the accidental modification of data. That means sometimes we can accidentally modify the data. For example, in normal programming, using let's say C programming structure concept. So if we have a structure name, let's say book, and let's say it has different member function, let's say the character name 30, let's say integer page number, and let's say I'm defining b1 and b2 variables. So in anywhere from our program, considering this is a global variable, let's say, so whenever we can access this variable, if I write b1 dot page numbers equal a value, then I am basically changing the value. So at a later portion of my program, if I write again beyond that page number equals 60, so I am basically changing the value, right? So this is in case of C programming, we call it feature. So we can change it from anywhere, but we can accidentally modify this thing. Like we can say that this is accidentally modified, that we didn't intend to change, but somehow it got changed. So we can put a restriction. That means we can provide a feature that it cannot be changed whenever we want it. So that thing, we are saying that it puts a restriction. So it can put restriction on accessing variables and methods directly. So this can prevent the accidental modification. That means whenever we want to modify the data, we need to go to through a certain process. That is not a certain thing that if I do this, it will be done. So there should be a certain process that will help us to prevent accidental modification. So as I was saying that we will be providing such way that an object's variable can only be changed by an object's method. We'll discuss what do we mean. So let's say we have the same person class, and we have different variables here like name, age, and profession, just like our previous example. But here we are saying that the age, this is a private variable. So this thing private variable, here we have this public private concept. So private means this cannot be accessed from outside of the object. So we are providing a restriction that cannot be accessed outside of the object. So this is synonymous to our local variable and global variable concept. So in local variable and global variable concept, what we generally do, we say that the variables that can access from any functions, we call them global variables. And local variables cannot be accessed outside of a function. So local global variables are with respect to different functions. Whereas this private or public, these are referred as different objects or different class. So that is one of the difference I can say. But the idea is synonymous. So here, in order to mention any variable or any data as private, in Python we provide this double underscore. But don't worry about it since we are not learning Python. The main thing, if you notice here, what is the feature it is providing. So we provided the age variable as double underscore. That means we are saying that it is a private variable. So outside of this particular person class or any object created from person class, we cannot access the variable. So we are putting a restrictions. Now if we notice what is the restriction we provided. So let's say we are initializing the person class by name Sabit Hassan, age 16 and engineer. Now, dict variable is basically shows the different objects or the attributes. So if I provide person.dict, so it is basically providing the name and age and profession. Now, if you notice, the underscore age, that is the thing we created, but Python automatically created this thing person. So this is the providing some restriction. So that's why even if you want to change its value, like here, let's say you want to change its value, or if you want to show this value, person.age, so it is showing an attribute error. It is saying it doesn't know about what I am talking. As I was saying, if you notice, person object has no attribute age. So although we define the age here, so we cannot access this thing from outside. Now why you cannot access? This is the feature we are saying. So this is the encapsulation. This is providing a restriction so that we cannot access outside. So that's why this is the feature we are saying that encapsulation provides a restriction. So now what is the other variables here? We have the name variable and profession variable. So we cannot we can access those variables since we didn't provide underscore here. That means those are public variable. So if I show you here, like, so okay, probably there is an example or something. Okay, so I may show you here. So if you printed like PRSN dot name, then you will not find any error. Why not error? Because we define name as the public variable. We didn't provide any restrictions there. So if we want to access person.name or person.profession, that was completely fine, what we did in our previous class. But we cannot access the age directly in this way since this is the feature we are providing restrictions there. So how can we access? As I was saying here, if you notice, so here we are saying that we can provide restrictions, and the restriction is that object's variable can only be changed by an object's method. So if we provide a method right here, if you notice, we are providing a method update age. So if you want to update its value, or if you want to show the value, so we are defining a method itself within here. So show age, and we are saying printing here, and similarly update age. So update age, if we provide any value, so we are setting that value here. That's why if we call PRSN1 dot show age, then this is completely fine since we are basically calling a method of that particular object. Okay, so that is completely fine. It is basically showing me the age value, but we cannot access it directly. And if you want to change the value, we need to call the update age function here. So the takeaway from here, what you need to understand for particularly this course is that encapsulation is the process of wrapping data and methods together. And what is the benefit? The benefit is we can provide restrictions on accessing the data. So we can only sense or we can only play with the data using that object's function, not from outside. So that is the encapsulation. That is the particular thing you need to know for this course. And all this Python implementation, that doesn't necessary. So again, since it is here, if I just explain what is written here, so if you notice, sorry, so dict, it is showing different values. Similarly, if you call person dot profession, so it is completely fine. Even if you want to change the value person dot profession equals worker, so if you notice, it is now changed as worker. Engineer is now changed to worker. So this is completely fine with public variables. But as I was saying that if you want to access the age, this is not allowed. Why? Since this is the restriction we have given there. So even if you want to think like I am changing the age value, like if you write person.age equals 30, so you may think that yes, you changed the age value, but actually not. You basically saved another value. Now if you notice, let's say you mentioned person age 30, so you basically saved another value age equals 30, but the original age that is being untouched. So you couldn't modify the value by calling directly like this. So that is the properties of encapsulation. Like here it is showing like if I define another variable person head equals to let's say round, this will be just another variable. Okay, so in this process, even if you think like you want to change like person dot person age equals 96, so it would be another variable, but you cannot change this variable directly in this process. If you need to change, you need to call the update variable. Like here it is showing probably so first it is showing the show age. So if you call the show age, it is showing the actual age 16 here. So first it is printed the dictionary dict, that means all different objects, and then it called the show age. So age 16, the original age is being showed here. Voter eligibility, so a function was written basically here whether the person is a voter or not. So it compared with 18. So if the age is greater than 18, it will provide true. If the age is less than 18, it will provide false. So that's why it printed false. And if you want to change the value, you need to call the method. So this is here. If you want to change a restricted variable, you need to call the method of that particular object. So that's why it called the method, a dedicated method what update is, and it provided value 20. So that's why again the same thing is being called the dictionary. Now if you notice, in the dictionary the age is now being changed to 20. So 16 is now being changed to 20. How? Since we call the update is here. So that's all. Now since the age is 20, so that's why of course the voter eligibility will be true, nothing else. So again and again I'm saying don't worry about this Python implementation. Just try to understand what is the concept here. What do you mean by encapsulation? So second properties or pillars of object-oriented programming is abstraction. So let's discuss theoretically. So abstraction means is the process of hiding the real implementation. Okay, let's say we all have smartphones, but how many of you know how a smartphone works? I mean, what are the different components are there within your smartphones? How those different subsystems or components interact with each other? So we don't need to know how does it work. We just need to know how can we operate it. So that's the main thing. How can we call? How can we use internet? How can we use different features of a smartphone? We don't bother how it will work at most cases unless we are engineer. Anyway, so that is the thing, the abstraction. That means we are not interested in the real implementation at most cases. So we are hiding the real implementation. Just like a smartphone, we just need to call, we just need to use internet and other features, the camera and so on. But we are not interested to know how the camera works and so on. Someone may have, maybe enthusiastic and he may know personally, but that is not important here. So the same thing here. That abstraction is the process that it hides the real implementation, all those complex implementation, complex engineering. So abstraction means we are hiding those things, and we are basically providing an interface for the user so that they can use it. So abstraction is the process of hiding the real implementation of an application from the user and emphasizing only the usage of it. That means how can we use it? That is the main thing we are focusing. How does it work? That is not important unless we are a programmer, let's say, in programming concept. So another example is given here. Let's say TV remote. So most of the times we basically wanted to know how can we increase the volume, how can we change the channel and so on. But we don't want to know how does it operate. The same thing here in a object-oriented programming, we basically hide the real implementation in different objects. So in our previous person class, so we have person class, and then within person class we have different you know complex term here, like we define some variables as private variable, just like our previous example, the age variable or age data was private, so we could not access it variable outside. So to access or to update that variable, what we did, we define an update age method within itself, update is. So there are complex things within itself, but we are not interested in it. We will just show that there is an update is function. So if an user provide update is any value, it will work. Okay, so he doesn't need to know how does it is being changed there. So that thing is the abstraction. Since we are encapsulating, or we can say that we have different classes, and classes means we define different objects. So we have data and methods, so there are implementation within those objects, within those classes. But as for users perspective, we are not interested that much unless I am a programmer. So that's why the concept abstraction. So abstraction means, if anyone asks you what do you mean by abstraction in object-oriented programming, you can say object-oriented programming actually hides the real implementation and focuses how can we use that thing. So that is one of the feature or one of the pillars of object-oriented programming, abstraction. So far we completed two features or two pillars, encapsulations and abstractions.